Say that your company recognizes a problem. Most likely you'll recognize a symptom first. We aren't growing as fast as we like. Our profits aren't where they want to be. Our new product isn't performing the way it should. Something will happen as a symptom and you're trying to evaluate the problem. Well, how do you know if it's a marketing problem? Where do you start to evaluate if it's your strategy or if it's a tactic? In this video, I'm going to introduce some thoughts and methods for beginning to evaluate marketing strategy. So first, recall some of the key elements of strategy. Just in general, every organization needs to have within a given target market, a well-defined target market, some value proposition. Something that is a clear reason or way in which it is solving some problem for a customer, alleviating some problems a customer has, or some aches or pains that they're feeling. We need that validated and clear value proposition. We need that well-defined target market. We need to have some sustainable source of competing, a sustainable source of a competitive advantage. It might be how we're differentiated through our brands. It might be a cost benefit that we have in terms of our production. There are many different sources of a potential competitive advantage, but we have to have something sustainable so our competitors are just going to come in and take over whatever we are able to create in our target market, and perhaps through imitation or through doing something better. We then need the capabilities that support our value proposition and that allow us to implement that competitive advantage or competitive advantages. We need these internal capabilities that allow us to operate in an effective way, and they need to be capabilities that competition cannot easily imitate or would be at a disadvantage if they tried to. So these are some key concepts related to strategy in general, and we're operating under that broad umbrella. So something to remember if we're evaluating, we see symptoms, we want to evaluate the problems. A key concept to keep in mind is that for any strategy to be effective, it requires fit. So you identify a target market, and within that you have some of your marketing program goals, your pricing strategy, brand strategy, communication strategy, etc. You have that value proposition that you're providing to this target market. And then you also have all of your other organizational strategies. You might have an IT strategy. You might have a finance strategy, a debt strategy, whatever other concepts, whatever other parts of your business you're operating. All of your strategic decisions have got to fit. From a marketing perspective, we want to evaluate our decisions fitting around the target market. Is everything we're doing working together to create and provide this value proposition for this specific target market? And that's really the source of where our strategy evaluation would start, or any evaluation would begin. It may be perhaps to rule out the strategy is the problem. It may be that tactically we're doing something wrong, but we can start high level and think, okay, let's just evaluate first. Is it our strategic fit? Is this something that's causing the problem to begin with? So we might look at some marketing strategy elements to determine either to confirm this is where the problem is, or to say, no, it's not marketing strategy. Now let's either look further down at some tactics, or let's look in other areas of the business. When we evaluate our marketing strategy, we're going to first look at how well we understand our target markets, knowing who it is we're trying to serve. Then we want to evaluate how well we're articulating our positioning statement. And this here I'm referring to internally. Do the people who are running and operating our business clearly understand the positioning we're trying to achieve? So, and in knowing that, are they acting strategically, making strategic decisions in a way that supports that ideal positioning? And then if those two things are fitting and those two things are in line, we're going to begin to evaluate our marketing programs fit, the channels, brand strategies, pricing strategies, etc. We'll start to look at how well all that fits underneath those first two elements. So first, let's briefly look at some ways to think about and evaluate. Do you really know who you're targeting? The answer to this is important. If you don't have a clearly defined answer to who you're targeting, who you're trying to serve, you might be framing the wrong competitors, and that could be part of the problem. You might not be defining your marketing opportunities properly in terms of their size. You might not be using the right tactics because you think you're targeting one group, and the tactics are actually designed for a completely different group. Because these things all flow from and have to fit with who you're targeting. That's why it's important to start there. It impacts so many other things that we're doing. For instance, in this first example, think about Therma-Tru doors. Here we have a company that operates globally. We're selling doors and entryways, windows through to end consumers in some way, into homeowners that might come through and purchase this at a retail store. They might go and request a certain door design to be in a home that they're having built, or they might be remodeling. And so some of what we're doing, we've got to present a value proposition to them. We've got to be positioned in a way that we think is going to be most persuasive in the minds of homeowners. But that's just part of who we're targeting. We also might have businesses that we're targeting. For instance, we also have to provide the right value proposition to retailers who might be selling our doors and entryways. We also might think the strategies that we use might be different. The value proposition we offer might be different when we think about how we're targeting wholesalers or builders. So now you start to look around and you can get a sense of how important it is to truly first start with who is it you're trying to target? And from then, before we even start to think about our position and how well our value proposition fits. So we start, and this could be consumers, it could be a business, it could be both. We might have multiple target markets we're trying to satisfy, even with the same set of products. Now, another way to think about targeting, once we realize the breadth and understanding the whole picture of who we're targeting, we need to start thinking very clearly about who we're targeting. And on one level, you might just describe them demographically. I'm targeting males, I'm targeting females, I'm targeting people over the age of 50. I want to hit a demographic in between the ages of 25 and 45. We might have something very general way of describing people. The more specific we can get, the better we can articulate who we're targeting, the better we can begin to work into what strategies are going to be effective and whether or not we have a problem with some of the programs that we're trying to fit with our strategy. So think of it this way. We could also look at the benefits people seek. So here we might think, okay, a golf cart is going to go for people who have a certain level of income and perhaps live in a certain geographic area near a golf course, or in a gated community. And that's one way they define them. We might look alternatively a little deeper and define our market by the benefits that they seek. So perhaps we have some people who are buying golf carts not just to get around their neighborhood and get out to the golf course, but perhaps it is also part of defining who they are. It's a part of the way they express themselves. And so we might start to design custom golf carts. And our strategies will be around how do we develop and design and innovate custom golf carts that allow people to really identify who they are. We could then go a little deeper, and there's work by Christensen and Day from dating back to 2010. The most recent revision of their work is in 2016, and they talk about integrating or thinking about defining customers around the job to be done. I'm going to come back to that example in just a second. But first, just to summarize, the more specific, the more clearly we can define who we're targeting, the better we are going to be at evaluating if we have a problem in our marketing strategy or with our marketing program or with the value proposition. We're going to be more effective in those areas as well. For instance, a second example, let's say that we were going to be targeting a group of people for fundraising. And I look at a community and I say, well, we're going to target people, these segments. We're going to have a segment who are churchgoers that attend our church regularly. We're going to have another segment who are the volunteers and the leadership. And then we're going to think about the entire parish, the entire church. They may be people who registered at one time. They may be guests. They may not be going to church, but we know we have their email from a Facebook campaign we did or something. And so if we segment it that way, then the communications we use, the way we express and try to deliver our value is going to be different than if we were to segment the same group, the same market, segment them based on the size of potential donation. We might look at this and say, you know what, we're really not concerned with their role in the community. We want to segment and think about their potential value to our whatever we're asking them to donate to. So we're going to look at large donors, small donors, and non-donors. In which case, then you begin to evaluate, okay, if we're not having enough large donations come in, all right, have we properly targeted and defined that group? Check. Now we can move on to other elements. Are we giving a clear value proposition to them? Are we having the right program integrated to support our efforts to market to that group? But we start with making sure we have the right targets defined. Now, that example was very simple definitions. I'll go back to talking about how we might define around the job to be done. And this is an example taken from the Christensen and Day's work on integrating around the job to be done. A donut shop found out that they started to see a large increase in their milkshake sales. And they thought, wait a second, what is it? How do we take advantage of this? Our milkshakes we're selling more of these milkshakes. How can we increase? How can we jump on this and go around and increase this wave, ride this wave? So they started looking into it, doing some research. And one of the things that they found was that their customers that were coming in, these morning customers, so, general description, they're morning customers. Okay, well, what are we doing? What's the job that these milkshakes are doing for morning customers? What's the source of our value that they're seeing here? And to do that, they looked at the benefits they were seeking and why do they hire a morning milkshake? What is it that they want that milkshake to do for them? Well, research communicated a few things. First, the problems that they saw is these morning commuters, actually, more specifically, these were commuters who had a long, boring commute. And they tended to be driving. They're driving themselves into the city on a long commute. They were getting bored, and they wanted some way to keep their extra hand busy. Ideally not texting or checking news on their phone, but something that would also allow them to be safe and to look at the road and traffic around them. So they needed something that was going to keep them busy, something that would be safe. They also needed to delay hunger. This is their morning commute. They may not eat until later on in the day, so they wanted something that made them feel full. They were wearing work clothes, so they didn't want to get very messy, and they were in a hurry. So think about how their product, that once they saw that, ways you can operate, think about now your programming, how you design your product and your services around that definition of your customer and their problem to better serve them, to take advantage of this. And so some of the things they did, if they designed their milkshakes the correct way, then they found that it could take up to 20 minutes to finish a milkshake. Check, we're covering the long, boring commute. They could only use one hand to hold their milkshake and to drink their milkshake. That worked out great. And they found that a lot of people found that the thicker milkshakes with more things added into them were more filling than having a banana. It was also cleaner than other options, perhaps a bagel that was crumbling or had some type of cream cheese on it that then was making their hands messy. And where do they wipe their hands? These were all, again, product solutions they found that were matching up to their better definition now of their customers and the problem they faced. How do you now ideate? How do you look around addressing the problem if you know that they're also in a hurry? What ideas come to mind? You might start self-service kiosks. You might start mobile ordering ahead of time. But as you begin to identify who your target market is, you start to think clearly about what defines that target market and what they're looking for, the job they want done. You can begin to think better about your product and the services you provide to reach them. So just another example of how important it is to have the right target market and a very clear defined target market and to know as much about them as you can. Another element of marketing strategy we'll need to evaluate is our positioning statement. This helps us understand, why do customers choose us over other options? Companies are really good at having a mission statement, and some are better than others at making sure everyone in the organization knows and understands and believes in that mission statement. And that statement talks about the organization's purpose, talks about who they are, why they exist, and it guides their organizational decision making. And strategy philosophers are will speak a lot about the importance of your mission statement. Well, in marketing, the positioning statement is equally as important and equally as critical. Our positioning statement is our statement of our product's meaning in the customer's minds relative to competing options. Remember, who we define as our target market will define who we think of as competitors and what these competing options are. But we need, before we start to evaluate is our marketing program right? If we know our target market, we need to think next, how do we want them to think about us relative to competitors or competitive options? The reason is, if they think of us more favorably, if we have a more ideal position in their mind, they're more likely to choose us over other options. A generic way to write a positioning statement would look something like this. Our product or brand, whichever level you're talking about, is, and state the most important claim that we have. So I'm going to use here just a Disney World, thinking of the theme parks. Disney World is the most exciting family vacation destination among all theme park destinations, among all vacation options, because we have the greatest service that is connected with meaningful stories through well-developed movie and TV products. So we want to be the most family-oriented and most exciting among all other theme parks, and we can be that way because of our high level of service and our connection to our movies and other themes that we develop in other market spaces. Having a well-articulated positioning statement is critical, because once we know our position internally among our organization, then that leads us to consistent communications, brand development, and other decisions that impact how we do externally. If everyone knows they're operating to achieve a certain meaning in this target market's mind, then everyone can work together in concert. We can achieve a better fit of our program decisions. Think of that Disney example. If you start to imagine what you see in terms of advertisements through social media, through your personal experience perhaps of Disney World, and then you compare that to what you see if you start to look around, say, for Universal Studios. Here are two parks in the same, they're both in Orlando, they're miles away from each other, easily could be competing for the same customers. So if you look to Universal, you're going to see more pictures of thrill. You're going to see many more pictures of adults out, perhaps having alcohol included, music. Now, notice there's still thrilling things at Disney World. There's still alcohol. You can go to Epcot Center and walk around and have as much alcohol as you could at Universal. But the position they want to achieve is not based on that. Those are parts of their service, part of the experience that they know they offer to compete, but it's not the core of the position they want to have, of the promise that they're making in their value proposition. So their advertisements, their design, what they promote, what they put their focus on is going to be different. You can think about this through television too. Around Christmas time, you might notice how Hallmark will promote and look at their movies, the types of movies that they're going to have, and most of them will have a love interest, and they're going to have more of a drama element to them, and they will have very clear-cut storylines. And then you look at Freeform, which now targets also families, may still target some of the similar demographics, but Freeform on their Christmas times are going to do less of their own movies. They're going to use movies that already exist elsewhere. They might be a little bit more edgy, then less about the love interest perhaps. And so the product decision, the promotion decisions are all around the position they want to have, the experience that they're trying to provide, their value proposition for the specific group they're targeting. But all that follows from the position they want to have in the customer's mind. That's why it's important to begin evaluating your marketing strategy by thinking first of your target market. Then you have to make sure you've clearly identified your ideal position. With those two together, you can start to look at your marketing program, your channel strategy, your pricing strategy, communication strategy, your overall product strategy. Begin to look at those strategic decisions and eventually the tactics that are working underneath those strategies. But now we can start to really look at fit. We have our target market clearly defined, our ideal position. We start to evaluate our marketing program strategies fitting. If these marketing program strategies fit, then we start to look over at business strategies. Perhaps we don't have the right capabilities to support all of this, even though we've planned it out well on the marketing side. Perhaps it's not fitting with some of the IT resources we have, or the IT strategy. We can start to look at it now if we think systematically about evaluating the problem through this marketing program lens. Fit is a key characteristic. So we're going to stop here. We're going to wind up this video here. And the last thing I'll highlight is just maybe a way you could think about doing this if you were to sit down and begin evaluating. Again, you recognize some symptom. You're trying to identify the problem. So you start out with one of the ways you begin is you think, okay, who's our ideal customer? Have we clearly defined them well enough? Not just that they're by their demographics, but perhaps by the job they need to get done, or something more about the way they behave or the roles that they have? Do we have that clear customer definition? From that, do we know what we want our ideal customer to think of us? Do we know the position we want to have? What's our most important claim? What's our brand personality that we want them to see? What are our points of difference? Make sure, can everyone in your organization who's impacting your work, do they know the answers to your positioning statement? Can they fill that in? If that's working and you have a good target market definition, you have your positioning statement is understood, now you start to look at your program elements, your channels, your pricing, your brand decisions, your communication decisions, and you can think, okay, the purpose of this program element, the purpose of using this channel is to target this customer and achieve this and help support this position. Is that channel doing that? And you can start to look through that and evaluate it. The purpose of this pricing was to target this customer to achieve this positioning. Is it supporting it? Now you have a framework for looking more at the program strategies and the program level tactics to evaluate if marketing in strategy is part of the problem. Move on from that, and then you start to think, is it tactical, or is it somewhere else in your business that's the core problem causing the symptom that led you to your analysis in the first place?